a spring tradition in the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County for more than a decade. Last year, it happened in March as one of the very first programs that we did on Zoom. But only a few of the poets who are members and friends of UUFDC were willing or able then to record their poems. And most of the poems were available only in a Word document. Well, with a year of Zoom meetings behind us, we can now present a full reading, a baker's dozen of poems by 12 poets. Now, all of the poets that you will hear have been published. Some have published at least one book. Several have won awards for their poetry. The group includes 4 poets laureate of Door County. We have among us practiced architecture, art, construction, education, engineering, services, law, music, religion, and theater. But we have all turned to poetry to express our deepest feelings and thoughts. Our theme this year is the pandemic itself, the various ways that we have experienced it, the highs and lows of that experience, and our sense of how we and our fellow or sister human beings will ultimately get through. As always, our poets see not only things in our world differently from each other, but their voices and their poetic styles also differ. Some of the poems that you will hear are short, others are long, some are filled with images, others ideas or extended metaphors. Some are lyrical, some are narrative. They all exhibit the craft of poetry, even though they do not rely on rhymes. Poetry is the art that brings us closest to the person who is speaking. So these poems engage the mind, the body, and the spirit, or the head, the hand, and the heart of the poet and also of the listener. And they respond directly to the desire of UU founders in Door County to include the arts in the array of services that we offer. So we welcome you to this. We hope that you will enjoy the process of listening and that some words, images, or metaphors will linger in your minds when the reading is over. We're going to begin with a poem by Larry Eriksson that takes us back 70 years or more to another pandemic that called out a very different public response. Larry.
Thank you, Estella. The title of my poem is Living with the Virus. A 9-year-old boy, hostage in his yard, no trips to the pool, no parties with friends. So many were sick, one just down the street, some in hospitals, many young like him. The summer dragged on. He missed his classmates, playing with his friends, learning new subjects. Then there is fresh hope. A vaccine arrives, thanks to Dr. Salk, who wants polio.
Mm-hmm. Next is Jack Redell's poem about our early response to the pandemic in a world propped up by fictions. It's titled Waiting for the Better Story, and it's read by Jami Hanreddy.
Thank you, Estella. I'm really privileged to be able to read Jack's lovely story. Waiting for the Better Story, after Charles Yu's article in Harper's Magazine. We are experiencing referendums on reality in a world propped up by fictions, impervious to evidence. Deeper than reason are absurdities normalized in an imaginary realm of invented space. Fantasy, becoming a universe people never have to leave, never able to escape. There is no returning to reality when you have a better story.
Thank you. And now Reverend Mark Richards addresses the year 2020 in what he calls an anthem to 2020. Mark?
Thank you, Estelle. Anthem to 2020. We chanted, we marched, we gathered to sing the whole of our being together. We rejoiced in the coming awakening. We ate together, we drank together, we created together, we loved together. The music makers joined our hearts. The mystery makers joined our souls, all the while finding God in each other's eyes. Then you snuck into our lives. You sucked the sap of our gathering. You brought long arms of injustice to our spaces. Your viral invasions infected the souls of people yearning to be free. Turning them in upon themselves and each other, your sickness created our isolation, generated the lonesome cries of elders dying and young ones suffering loveless in sterile draped rooms. You overworked the good offices of those in covenant to heal the sick and right the wrong. You cast us each against the other with fears of poverty and death. My isolation surrounds me. I am helpless to face overwhelming forces. I am numb to senseless suffering. I cannot breathe. Human connections are unstable networks zooming through my days. Still, I cannot smell your fears or touch your tears. I turn to the land to assuage my soul. I begin to welcome my lonesomeness. I am still present. I am still grateful. I still love. Finally, you reached your fever pitch. After invading our bodies, after invading our temples, you begin to drown in the undertow of fallacious hypocrisy. Your virus takes on new forms, but we recognize each expression and call messengers of healing to resurrect our bodies, our minds, and our souls. I will forever be lonesome, yet hopeful that your desire to desecrate our lives will succumb to our indelible need to hold another soul.
Thank you. David Clowers is next with the poem titled It's Languishing, about the way people slipped into a world between the one where they had been thriving and the future world over which they had little control. David.
It's languishing. Where we've been is where we are, perhaps wishing to be Icarus who reaches for the sky, or maybe Cerberus who defends his special hell, while our motivations have been locked like prisoners in coronavirus cells. Here, even grief would be relief because it's something instead of this. The alive insignificance of everything except Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, that are dulling our delight and dimming our desire until we're something lambent instead of a full-fledged fire. There is no antonym for rampant, but it feels a bit like absent, and the imposture of our vertical isn't flaccid, it's farcical. Because between our boredom and a hoped-for state of flow, we're indifferent to indifference, and we've slipped into our solitude. There was nowhere else to go. It's languishing.
Thank you. Sharon Auberle's poem begins with the ache that calls forth memories of miraculous experiences we didn't appreciate at the time. It's called Avatars.
Avatars. Some mornings I wake aching for the days when life was exceedingly sweet and somehow I didn't know it. The only thing to do on these days is look up to the vast sky and remember how it was to fly far above those cloud castles. Then look down on our planet with bird eyes, with God eyes. Recall how we soared on wide silver wings, catching the rush of wind and sun and light. Oh, the miracle of flying. Like the Navajo medicine man, awestruck on his first flight, exclaiming amazement and joy at how close he was to his gods, how they could hear his prayers better up there. Maybe one day, if we all come together in one sky-sent song, those gods will take pity on us, descend to this ragged and broken earth, land like tall shining birds among us, leaving a trail of bright feathers for us to follow.
Beautiful, thank you.
I will follow with a poem written after a wonderful experience with our son on April 30th, 2020. It took place over the phone while he was paddling on a board on Squaw Creek in Ames, Iowa, and we were home in Door County. It's called Safer at Home. Late afternoon, we have taken a letter to the PO and driven through the state park, yearning to be on the water, not above it, looking down. I'm reading email, signing petitions, when the satellite phone rings and it's our son, paddling his board on Iowa's Squaw Creek on the northwest side of Ames after work. He's just seen 22 pairs of great blue herons in their rookery, their young peeking out of nests, and he's been hearing barred owls. 2 of them fly after he rounds a bend through a small rapid whose dashing water we can hear on our speaker, along with the mating call of a songbird. We've been on the nearby river in canoes so we can picture the thick undergrowth along the banks. He has a new life jacket with pockets that hold a beer, water, snack food, and his smartphone to which he's firmly attached. When he wants a picture, he lays down the paddle, fastens it, and lifts the phone from a Ziploc bag. He can't get flying owls, but herons, yes, and deer. While we talk, he counts 15 of them, 2 young bucks, some yearlings and does in clusters come to drink at dusk before they bed down for the night. Close to the park where he will disembark, a voice calls out from a balcony to ask if the creek is clear for passage, and he says, there are places where it's not, but he got through. He leaves us near the takeout where his wife waits, but we stay on the virtual board, looking up a map, an aerial view of the creek bed, and all evening the images of herons, deer, and water that carries the debris of winter away fill our hearts and heads. We too will get through.
Ethel Davis has written a poem about the elements of the pandemic that have affected all of us who were not among the essential workers in her poem called The Slowing. Ethel.
The slowing. There comes a time when there is a slowing, when the snow is too heavy and too deep, when I cannot put the black harness on the back of my little horse, so I must walk it back to the tack room through thigh-high drifts. And that is when I catch a glimpse of her through the open barn door. She is munching a mound of hay from last summer's days, and it is the sound of happiness.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Jami Hanreddy presents an exuberant poem about coming to know her new puppy during the pandemic, a process shared by many throughout the country, as the scarcity of rescue pets suggests now. It's titled P-Words.
Thank you, Estella. P-words. My pandemic puppy's personality evolves piece by piece, pound for pound. So it's plainly impossible to pen a poem portraying the panoply of who she is at the moment, or who she will pan out to be in perpetuity. But there may be portents of things to come in how and where she chooses to pee and poop. Not on her pillow or mine, praise be, but also not on the predicated predictable grass. Instead, she pounces on putrefying leaves, first pushing her perspicacious snout deep into the pile as she pants after plush baby bunnies or pusillanimous mice. When she decides to postpone the death penalty for the bunnies and pardon the mice, she plies to pee, then takes plenty of time to pace back and forth and back to make sure there are no poisonous snakes or spiders, or so the pet pundits claim, before she pretzels into poop position and leaves the leaves a perfect present. Over the next months, I plan to ply my trade to help her become a person in pup's clothing who will channel her passions toward compassion and pray for a peaceful transition of power.
Thank you. Donna Johnson finds pleasure in the retreat from busyness and in the world that comes to light when that busyness is gone. In her poem, Not Missing the Time Before.
Surrounded by stillness, I pause to listen to the gently falling rain, struck by an appreciation of simple things glossed over in the time before stay at home, before COVID-19, rushing to this and that, ever busy to the point of distraction. But now, no work, no appointments, no concerts, or no plays. Connections mostly electronic give me the luxury of time. Time to stop, to nap, to refresh. Time to sit on the deck and delight in the parade of birds feasting on seeds. Flash of goldfinch, brilliance of indigo bunting, scarlet cardinal and his drab mate, no-nonsense black and white chickadee, humble brown chipping sparrow in its orange cap, the hairy woodpecker and its bigger, flashier cousin, the pileated woodpecker, house finches looking like they flew through strawberry jam. Being able to stop along the highway to photograph the newly emerging cherry blossoms, redbud, star magnolia, forsythia, lilacs, and the greening of trees. Oh, what I would have missed if I were still in the time before. Thank you, Estella.
Thank you. But by the summer of 2020, as deaths from the virus climbed and our country seemed on the brink of chaos, the positive elements that we had managed to find in the pandemic were eclipsed for many. Tom Davis will read I Name the Crises. Tom?
Okay, thank you, Estella. The virus raging as so many elders die, and young people party, drinking into laughter, risking brains that swell with fevers, many strokes, hallucinations that skew apart their world. The economy collapsing into unemployment as breadlines form, like in the Great Depression, hollow eyes looking out at the world with despair, even as social distancing, safety is an impossibility as you stand in line, hungry and afraid. The video of a black man saying, I can't breathe 20 times as a white policeman kneels on his neck, hearing him call for his mother out of his terror, exploding into nation consciousness, the history of white robes and hoods, spasm of Confederate statues desperately rewriting the history of military and social loss, the trail of tears, a president throwing paper towels as Puerto Rico mourns destroyed homes, flooded lives, spirits concentrated by a hurricane in rows of graves. The teetering of democracy as Black, brown, Asian, Native people stand in lines for hours to vote in rainstorms, intense heat, cold as sanctimonious voices praise the Lord in American exceptionalism and celebrate cages on the border where children separated forcibly from parents cry, and a flush-faced leader claims he is the one, the only one who can solve the problems he has helped intensify. Then the ecosystems warnings, as Antarctica glaciers melt, songbirds cease to sing, the Amazon forest burns and shrinks from year to year, migration from wars, starvation, ethnic rage, dictatorial triumph, put words in politicians' mouths that celebrate how great their country, their party is. And then the greed that celebrates the rich selling snake oil. Come, give us tax breaks, roads, communication networks, robots that feed our wealth-making machines. Rescue us when our banality threatens our prosperity as a virus rages, the middle class collapses, small business people fail, poor families lose their home, the homeless starve. mental health deteriorates, people march for justice, the great extinctions of insects, plants, fish, all living things grows ever more deadly to the long-term health of the world and humankind. And greed demands the glorification of greed as a solution to the problems greed creates. I name the crisis. The question is, what do we as human beings do now?
And I will follow this with a very short poem given to the members of the poetry group Belles Lettres by Jami Hanreddy. It is titled Grief. The grief of loss is always an inside job, a stealthy thief that under interrogation will answer by lying about how long it will be before you can retrieve your broken heart from the evidence room.
And the last two poems, I think, move us somewhat, anyway, out of the pandemic. Nancy Rafal wrote a beautiful poem for Midsummer Music in her role as Poet Laureate. It's entitled, This Is.
Thank you, Estella, and thank you, Sarah, for your technical help with everything. This is not the poem I intended to write. That poem was full of hope, joy, love. That poem extolled nature, friendship, music. But the arrow of time turns tomorrow into today, into yesterday, and the world has vastly changed. An unseen force has brought the planet to a halt, a great pause, a time to breathe deeply, to think deeply, a time for reflection and resolve. We cannot return to what was. The arrow of time travels only toward tomorrow. We can build a world anew, a world without prejudice and hatred, without avarice, without rape of the earth. We can each walk forward with less baggage, throwing things to the flood, going beyond ourselves, knowing that mystery is the heart of light. So I wish for you to find the preciousness of each moment. Keep hope in your heart, joy in your music, and love in your actions. And that you will create friendship with all humanity, music in all nature, compassion in all your thoughts and deeds. Thank you.
And we will end with a poem by Ralph Murre that will appear in an anthology published by the Wisconsin Historical Society titled Hope Is, in honor of Emily Dickinson's famous poem. This one is titled, Hope is a Fishing Boat. Ralph.
A number of years ago, in a hymn that she wrote, the wonderful Canadian singer-songwriter Sylvia Fricker said, "And our sails are a hopeful color, filled with the wind of changing times." Hope is a fishing boat. That's right, an old gill netter out of Gill's Rock named Hope. Should be the name of every fishing boat, maybe. How else do you go out in bad Great Lakes weather, except hoping that nets are still there, untorn, hoping you're fishing for more than your fuel, that cormorants left some for you, hoping there's some left for your son and his son too, hoping to stay afloat, and yet you fish. Hope is every tractor on every farm, the seed, the bank, the soil, the rain, was the corn picker that took Uncle Ned's arm. Whatever it is or was about sunlight on new-turned earth that first took your heart, Hope is feeling that again. Your son Ben, your daughter Adrienne, for them, you say, you farm. Hope, damn it, really is the thing with feathers. This white-crowned sparrow outside my window this dismal day, whatever crumbs may come its way, whatever love another sparrow gives, Hope is the only thing I see that feeds the gnarled cedar on the limestone cliff where it lives. Hope is the 6-year-old you, your first ride on a two-wheeler, the 76-year-old you, and every ride on a BSA or a dual glide. Hope is what's left when panic and pandemic take a world from which hope has been torn. Just now out there, a pair of Orioles dressed in what may be the most hopeful color. Just now in here, an assurance that hope still is, even in the wind of changing times. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how our listeners feel, but I am just struck with the beauty and the intelligence of these poems. I want to thank all of the poets for continuing to write such wonderful things during this challenging year and for being willing to read your poems in this very shaky medium of Zoom. And I thank all who are listening. Poetry comes alive again and again in the minds of readers and listeners. You are essential to the process, to our continuation of the art of poetry. We're hoping that some of you will join some of us for the discussion on May 9th, Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning, also on Zoom, when listeners may want to offer their own responses to the pandemic and explore some of the words and images and metaphors from these poems. One of the great things about Zoom is that you can watch it again and check those images. Finally, may the light of the chalice be present in your lives, now and forever. Thank you.